This is the Storyworks Roundtable, where we have conversations about craft. Because becoming a successful author begins with writing a great story. Hello and welcome to this week's Storyworks Roundtable. Today, Kathryn, Robert, and I are delighted to be joined by Shari Medini and Karissa Tunis. Shari and Karissa are the co-authors of Parenting While Working from Home, a monthly guide to help parents balance their careers, connect with their kids, and establish their inner strength. They are also the co-owners of the popular parenting website, AdoreThemParenting.com. With 6 kids between them and over a decade of work-from-home experience, they love sharing strategies that help fellow parents minimize the overwhelm while trying to juggle it all. Well, welcome to the roundtable.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Now, today we're going to talk about co-authoring your book. How did you two meet? I understand you live in different states.
Yes, we do live in different states now, but I used to live in Pennsylvania, not that far away from Shari, and we actually met at the playground. One of her dear friends was one of my kids' preschool teachers, and we all ran into each other at the playground one day, and my child's teacher introduced the two of us, and we hit it off. We have kids similar ages, and right away realized that we had similar interests and parenting styles, and so we first became friends.
Nice. And did the idea for a book come up quickly? Was it like, hey, we're both writers, let's write a book? Or how did this evolve, this project?
Well, when we first met, we started sharing some frustrations that we had in parenting, and we decided to start a parenting website. And so that's how Adore Them Parenting was born. And we did that for 4 years, Shari, before the book was published? But that was kind of the goal, not right away, but as the website first was more of a hobby. And then as it started taking off, we really enjoyed writing, and we began having articles published in magazines around the country and even a few in other countries. And so the goal was just to continue with that writing process and see how far we could take it. So the next step then was the book.
Nice. And tell us about the co-authoring partnership. Were there any bumps in the road as you sort of found your style together?
I think that's what was so helpful about starting with the website is we were writing about parenting. We were writing these articles almost every day, right? That's kind of what goes into this social media website kind of world. So we were so used to reading each other's writing, editing each other's writing. We really had kind of combined our styles together so that we had a lot of experience in that area. I also highly recommend, going into this process, you don't want to just pick a co-author because you want someone to work with. Thankfully, we had a really good foundation. We trusted each other. We knew we worked well together. We had great communication about everything. And that was the foundation that let us write this whole book, because it is a stressful process and it is an emotional process. And, your first book, it means a lot to you. So knowing that it meant so much to both of us and that we both had each other's best interest in mind all the way through. And then on the practical side of things, just having written together daily, practically for 4 years, was extremely helpful.
Mm-hmm. How long were you neighbors and friends before you went to separate states and had to do this long distance?
Well, I moved to South Carolina about 3 years ago. But even before I moved, we only lived 10 minutes apart, but we almost never saw each other. We both had little toddlers at home. And so it was nearly impossible to get everyone out somewhere and then to be productive when we were together, So we got very used to just working through Google Docs, scheduling phone calls for when the kids were napping, and just being online at the same time, sharing our thoughts through the computer was really helpful. So when I moved, it actually didn't disrupt the way we were working together anyway.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, how would you describe your working styles then? Because it's obviously when there's two of you, you need deadlines, you need to work to each other's strengths and weaknesses. So to talk a little bit about that, how you each work. Obviously, you found some common ground quite clearly with Google Docs, but I'd be interested to hear, because for a lot of people, overcoming the frustrations and leaning into each other's strengths, I think, is the key. So I'd be curious to hear more about that.
We definitely divide and conquer. A lot of the, if we're talking about the website portion of things, a lot of the tech stuff is more of my strength. And then Karissa does an amazing job with outreach and working with guest contributors and working with brands. And, so we really fell into that a little bit. And initially, it was a lot of just communicating, what do you think about this? Are you okay if I say this? How do you think? And then, after a year or so, you're kind of like, I trust you, whatever you think, that's fine. That works for me. But I mean, there's a lot of different elements to that. With the book, we took our initial outline and basically split it 50-50. We went through a whole outline together on the phone and said, which of these do you feel really inspired to write about? Which of these things do you feel like you already have a lot of ideas about? And we split that up and started 50-50 for the rough draft and then flip-flopped. So whatever Karissa wrote first, I went through, I added my own ideas, I edited her stuff, and then I, would bounce it back to her and vice versa. So we were able to flip it back and forth a couple times. And then for the book, I ended up going through and editing the full manuscript overall, just to make sure everything was cohesive with one set of eyes before we turned everything in. But as far as the back and forth, I think it's also just a good match that we were also both had very similar goals. We were also both very passionate about this. Like there's never, and we know that there's going to be months that I go through. Maybe my kids are going through something. Maybe work is extra busy. Maybe, family life or whatever, friends or relatives are going through something. We just know that naturally throughout the course of life, we're going to kind of be more productive some months and not as much other months. And we get that. And we give each other that space and that time to have that balance.
Mm-hmm. So
nice.
How long?
Well done.
Yeah, very much. How long did it take you to get that first draft completed with, I guess you divvied it up half and half, but with the flexibility built into your process, were you ever frustrated with the goal setting and shifting things around, or was it very fluid?
We had no time to even think about it. We signed a book deal with a 1-month turnaround. For a book that was one of the book ideas in our proposal, but not the book we were pitching. So in the middle, with summer 2020, our kids are all home, everyone's stuck at home. Karissa had her 4th baby.
She was 3 weeks old when we signed that contract.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So talk about like not overthinking your first draft, right? It was just pedal to the metal, just write as fast as we can. And it was all up in our heads. We knew what we wanted to share. It was just a matter of getting it out. And, but really, Karissa was 2 weeks that we had like a manuscript.
I think it was 2 weeks till we had it all written, and then another week that we went through and edited, and we got everything over then to our agent and over to our editor. But yes, we met that deadline actually a few days early. But now to do it that way, I don't know if I could do it another way. It was just, we were in that mindset. And also the time of the year, having a baby, I wasn't leaving the house. People weren't stopping by. Still, COVID was very, scary. People weren't things were shut down. Mm-hmm. And so all we did was write. Every spare moment we had, we wrote, and there weren't a whole lot of other distractions. I mean, yes, kids and family and stuff, but all of our outside activities had been canceled. So we just got to work.
And thankfully, both of our husbands were working from home at that point too. So, even though everybody was doing their own thing, it was at least another set of hands, when someone needed lunch or whatever else was going on. But it was a sprint. It was an all-out sprint. I mean, that was all we did for 2 weeks straight. I couldn't think about, my husband would try to talk to me. I'd be like, I'm sorry, I have an entire book in my head. I can't talk about anything else. There's no room. So we made it work.
Wow. Talk about a fantastic example of living the book itself. I mean, it's the content, that is the nature of the content. So that's, and if you ever need any examples, you said, well, we're living it.
It was, for sure. I know I would talk to Karissa and I'd be like, oh, I should take my own advice. Like, I haven't been doing that lately. Or she would write something and I'd be like, oh, I need to incorporate that into our days. That's brilliant.
Yeah. So going back to these ideas you'd originally pitched, did you have sort of three or four outlines of things that you'd pitched? And if so, who came up with those initial outlines? Because you said, oh, we had an outline, but I didn't hear how that got created as well. But I think the listeners would be curious about that.
Yeah. So in our proposal that we had submitted to publishers, this particular book idea was just listed in the future book ideas section with a title and like a sentence of, here's something we feel like we could write about. And that was kind of the extent of it. So, when they came back to us, it was obviously they wanted to publish this quickly since it was very timely and a lot of people were working from home for the first time. So, they're like, okay, realistically, can you do this? What can you put together? And I think, Karissa, we had to send them some sort of outline or summary, like a chapter summary before we signed contracts.
I believe we did. So that's when we put the outline together. But when we pitched to them, we didn't have that. So we first started with the outline and gave a few sentences description as to what we could put in each paragraph. And then they actually came back with some ideas that they wanted us to incorporate as well. And then from there, that's when once we then all agreed upon the content topics, we then could create our more in-depth book outline and divide the topics and get to work.
Right, because you got the extra stakeholder in there of the publisher.
And we went through our outline very systematically.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah. So I was just sorry.
So
the way the book was set up was like a monthly guide where in each chapter is a different month of the year, but then within each chapter, we touched on some tips for you as the parent, kind of those self-care elements and all of that good stuff. We touched on ideas more along the parenting lines of how do you connect with your kids? What are some activities? How do you keep them entertained? How do you keep them out of your hair? And then the working from home element. So, how do you communicate professionally? How do you set up your workstation at home? So knowing that we had a very, I don't want to say rigid, but like we had structure to the full book, and it was a lot easier to fill in the blanks and work piecemeal because of that structure.
Mm-hmm. And something that we were doing with our parenting website is we tried to become very purposeful with publishing content that was relevant for that time of year. So going into it with that mindset, we kind of knew what topics were popular in January, February, March versus in September, October, November. So that really helped us too. We already had those ideas and then could take some of that and create new content.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love how having your existing content on your website set you up for this success, but then also the structure that you created and the teamwork. These are some really great takeaways for anyone who might be thinking about co-authoring, especially a nonfiction book like this. Now, with the two of you dividing the writing, were you trying to create one unified voice for the content, or were you alternating chapters or sort of labeling them? Here's Shari's voice, here's Karissa's voice. How did you handle that?
That was something, even when we turned it in, our agent was like, I was really curious what you were going to do with that. But what we ended up doing was deciding to keep it one cohesive voice. We felt like our writing styles and also our parenting styles and kind of our approach to this whole process was very similar. And more than that, it was the content that we wanted to shine. We didn't want people to get distracted by, oh, wait, was this Shari? Oh, wait, who's saying this? Is it correct? Like, because it didn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. We were just trying to convey helpful information. So we were able to keep that pretty cohesive. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Karissa.
No, I think you said it very well. I mean, it's definitely, that was something that we went back and forth on a lot in the beginning. But the way that we started writing it, and because even though some of it I wrote, some of it Shari wrote, we both edited each other's parts. So we both touched every part of it. So till the end, it would have been kind of hard to divide and say, well, that was Shari, that was Karissa, because we both had input in all of it. If you know us, you could maybe figure out some of the stories. I'm the only one with a daughter. So if there's a mention about a daughter, that's me. But, but like Shari said, we didn't want to disrupt the reader's experience and flip and say, oh, now this is Karissa's part or Shari's part. So I was very happy with how it all turned out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really smart to do that, I think, to because otherwise, as you say, it would be very jarring for the reader to think about it that way. So Shari, you did the final editing pass before it went in, before you turned it in. What did you notice you had to do to, if anything, to unify that voice? How did things jump out at you?
Well, the funniest thing was I did a Command F find thing for a couple words that I knew that we used a lot. The word just showed up. I don't remember what it was. I mean, hundreds of times. And I just went through and just got rid of a whole bunch of those. It was comical. So some of those kind of things, trying to make sure that we were not repeating ourselves too often. Every point you want to hit home that point, but you don't want to be redundant. But for the most part, that final edit was more, did we say everything that we wanted to say? Was there anything sticking out at me that, like noticing that we said just too many times, that we were harping on a point, for too long, that something wasn't clear? But for the most part, things were pretty well put together after we had already gone through, each of us had, it was like, I wrote it, Karissa edited it, I re-edited it. So each piece had already been touched 3 times. So being able to read through cohesively, there wasn't a ton that needed fixed.
Are you ready to write your novel with the guidance of a storycraft expert, using purpose, deadlines, and accountability to advance your project with the ongoing support of your fellow writers? Check out the Novel Journey, a fiction writers group coaching session just for novelists. We're going to further our knowledge and handling of novel writing craft, including structure, plot, character arc, supporting characters, point of view, narrative, and so much more, all while staying on track with our drafting goals. A new session begins February 2nd. Details at wordessential.com/editing/coach. Apply today. Seats are going fast.
Excellent. Yeah. I suppose, leaning back into that, having had the website and being writing together for a length of time prior is clearly an ideal situation if you've got to churn something out in a month.
For sure. And something with the two of us, I tend to write my background is more like professional writing. So I used to work as a freelancer for a lot of companies doing a lot of their brochures and blog posts and website content. So I tend to be almost a little colder, in my writing, sometimes a little bit too professional, a little bit too, you need to do this kind of thing. Where Karissa writes very warmly, very personably. So it's really nice that we always kind of pull each other to that middle. And that was kind of a piece of that editing too, that if I started getting, sounded too much like a lecture, Karissa was able to add some warmth and some personal stories to that aspect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you mentioned using personal stories. Do you find that you're able to illustrate everything you want to illustrate with your own experiences? Do you need to build composites or borrow from friends and family? And do you ever worry about kind of that privacy, talking about your children issue?
I do. Do you have anything you wanted to say on that, Karissa?
I think that's something that we decided very early on with the parenting website. I think at first even though we were very mindful, we did go back eventually and even edit things down even more. We were just super careful about sharing personal photos, even mentioning our kids by name. It's one thing to say my daughter or my son, but there was a couple articles that I had put their names in there and I went back and took those out. But for the most part, we're trying to speak about our viewpoint as parents. So we really try to be mindful about not telling our child's story or their version of it. So just having that mindset and practicing that for so many years, that definitely, I think, flowed over into the book as well.
Mm-hmm. And the other element, our whole purpose, what we're trying to do is sharing the positive parenting angle, that really respectful parenting, calm parenting, gentle parenting, whatever you want to call it, that we're not out here telling everybody how annoying our kids are, that even though I know there are days, right? But really trying to respect all of that. And since that's what we're trying to communicate, since that's how we're living our day-to-day lives, that a lot of what we're sharing is hopefully more in the positive direction. Here's what I learned from this, or my kid was struggling and here's how we got through it. But it is hard. I mean, it's so much harder than writing an article that goes on the internet that I know, okay, the internet's forever, but like I could draft it, I could delete it, I could edit it, I have a little bit of control. Whereas like sending a book out into the world, it's out of my hands forever. So there was, for me at least, there was a scary element to that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a fine line too, because you've really got to address people's pain in order to have nonfiction that works, because otherwise what's the point of writing and trying to help solve a problem? But if you lean into it, parenting, then it sounds like you're just writing this train wreck of a family. You don't want to do that either, because as you say, you're trying to hold a beacon up for the positive parenting. One of the things that always I struggled with nonfiction is that you pour your heart and soul into this beautiful gold content, and then people just read it and move on and don't use it. How did you handle that, if you've indeed experienced that? How did you handle that sort of thing and trying to help people turn your great wisdom into practice?
So every chapter ends with writing prompts. So we were able to close out in the hopes that it would stick with them a little bit longer. What did you learn? What kind of aha moments did you have? What do you need to keep working on? And we do write throughout the book, in the beginning and in the conclusion, especially, that you go revisit this, and touching on that point of, I know I've experienced that, where if I go back to a book a couple years later, I get entirely different information out of it because I'm in a different place personally. And, I don't know that anyone's actually going to do that, but we try to communicate some of that you're going to find the advice that you need during that stage of life. And even the structure of our book, with it being a monthly format, was kind of the hope too. Keep coming back to it. Don't just put it down after the first week, come back to it month after month as needed.
Mm-hmm. So what bumps in the road did you encounter as you were developing and growing your process and style as co-authors? And this might go back into the early days of building your website. It sounds like you were rocking and rolling by the time this book came around.
I think one thing that we've gotten really good at is just always being willing to pivot and try something new. And what we started out doing in the beginning, it looks very different than what we're doing now. Just even the way we design stuff, the way we lay things out, the topics we address, the way we, work with our clients and stuff. We do different projects now than we did when we first started. But I think just always being flexible and ready and willing to try something new, that has really helped us over the years.
Even with the books, not getting too attached to any one idea, because we know by the time it goes through the whole process, it could look very different, and not being afraid to move fast, pitch things, put things out there, and see what clicks. That's kind of the beauty of the internet piece of things, is that you'll know if something touches a nerve, hopefully in a good way, right? But you get that feedback pretty quickly.
And something that Shari always says that I always appreciate is she always says, it's never wasted. It's never wasted work. If we don't use it for this book, we can use it for an article down the road, or who knows what it will turn into. But we have files or folders of things that, who knows, maybe someday we'll use it. But I like Shari's view on it, that it's never wasted. We can always repurpose it into something else.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look where the one line in a query to an agent got you. So
Yes.
Yeah.
So you just never know, do you? Really, where those words end up. Did you get much pushback to change your manuscript once it had gone off? Were there things that they wanted different?
I don't want to sound too braggy about it, but she said, our editor was like, this is one of the best manuscripts I've gotten in a really long time, which was wonderful. That was so nice to hear. Of course, the little guy on my shoulder, was like, well, is that just because we don't have time to edit anything? Because it has to be in the printer in a couple weeks. But that was really nice to hear. So a lot of it was just, grammatical stuff. I apparently don't know how to use hyphens properly. That was a big edit the whole way through, doing all of that. But as far as structurally, there weren't a whole lot of content edits that we had to do, or any sections that we had to rewrite or rearrange, which again, I think goes back to that, making sure we were all on the same page from the beginning with the outline.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then going back to your shared history and the fact that you've got professional writing backgrounds anyway. So obviously you had a lot of things really working for you to do something in a very short time frame. A real perfect storm, actually. So did you plan the pandemic as well? Does that?
Oh, don't put that on us! My goodness,
really, Robert?
No, we did not. But you can't blame us for capitalizing on the opportunity, right?
Well,
No,
I think
definitely.
it's
very timely.
Yeah, but it's a great example, of the positive versus the negative that you're trying to draw out in your content, because it was easy for a lot of us to, and we even ran a couple of podcast episodes about it, you could fall into a funk. You really could. You could let the fear factor come in, or you could say, oh my God, when's this going to ever end? How am I going to work? It feels like the world was collapsing for a while there, but you guys just pitched a book deal and said, no. let's just crank it out. So you can turn opportunities from things that are quite grave. So well done.
Thank you. And I was so grateful for the distraction, because you can spiral. And even I've had people say, wow, that must have been so hard being stuck at home with the kids. And I'm like, honestly, it was kind of great, because they kept you in that routine. You had to feed them breakfast, lunch, and dinner and 50 snacks. You had to, they drag, it was like, oh, we're going stir crazy. We need to go on a hike somewhere by ourselves. We were able to kind of create our own world and stay busy, which has its pros and cons for sure. But I was really appreciative for it.
Yeah. Well, kudos to you. I think it's hard enough. You do hear a lot of excuses, myself included. I'm too busy. I didn't get time to write today. And somehow you made it through that. I'm curious about that. Sometimes I suspect that having a collaborative project helps because in a way you're accountable. Was there something in there that, I mean, obviously you had a deadline with an agent and a publisher, so there's people external you don't want to let down, but how did having two of you on it help there?
I think it always also helps.
Yeah. I mean, it keeps us focused. It keeps us motivated. And
I see like Karissa pops up in the Google Doc and she's typing furiously, I'm like, oh, maybe I should sit down and work on something too. Like it is, it is motivating.
Yeah.
Yeah. What advice?
But I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was done.
What advice would you two give to listeners who might be thinking about collaborating on a project with another writer? And especially if you're at the very beginning stages, you're just meeting someone or feeling someone out to start collaborating, and then kind of take us up into some of your pro tips. What do we need to know?
Ooh. Do you have any to start, Karissa?
I will say one thing that I was looking for. I kind of had another project going for a while that I was looking to either expand off of or just do something a little different. But I was looking for a partner that was good with technology because I was not. And when I met Shari and so many of our interests aligned and she was good in the areas that I wasn't, I thought she's my perfect partner. And so when I pitched her the idea, it was the seeds of what I had been thinking about, but together we made it into something completely different and something completely new. And, but I will say, like, before I ever even said anything to her about it, I was very intentional with trying to find someone that was strong in the areas I wasn't. And that has helped us in so many ways for as long as we've known each other, because like she said, like even down to our writing styles, like we make up for what the other one lacks a little bit. And just even with working, it's a natural divide of where our job roles, are, because she takes what she's really good at and I run with what I'm really good at. But then together we look over everything before it goes to a client or before it goes to a printer or whatever. Everything has both of us on it. But it was just so important to me to find someone that could offer something that I couldn't.
Mm-hmm. That's great advice.
Yeah. So having that balance of, strengths and weaknesses, but I think what keeps pulling us back together is some of the overarching similarities. Yeah, because I have worked with people in the past, especially doing a lot of freelance work. You're working with a lot of other people and you never want to feel like you're dragging the other person along. You never want to feel like you're pulling all of the weight. You never want to feel like you have to motivate. If you're working, truly co-authoring something, truly collaborating, you are just 50-50. And while that ebbs and flows, Karissa and I both are so motivated, but we also have similar working styles where we can like work in sprints. We can get so much done in a very short period of time. So being able to do that, whereas it might be frustrating for either of us if we were working with someone that likes to work more consistently. Like my writing schedule, I don't sit and write for an hour a day every single day. I write when I'm motivated, when I'm feeling inspired, I sit down and get a whole bunch out at once. I do things in batches. So I think as far as those kind of things go, and even just life-wise, that we understand we both value the family element of things, that your kiddo wakes up not feeling well. That's priority number one. Forget it. I got it. Don't check the emails. Don't whatever. Like, it's fine. We'll figure it out. So to have that other person where a lot of those things align, is really, really, really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fantastic. I love all of that. That's such a great takeaway for our listeners, the strengths and the similar, strengths and weaknesses balancing out, and then the similarities and also priorities. So what about now, when you've got your system, you've got your relationship, what do you do to keep things running smoothly?
I have my calls with Karissa. She is very, so I speaking of differences too, like especially at the beginning, I had an idea of the day, right? It was just kind of like, I'd text her, be like, you want to hear my idea of the day? Which is one of my strengths in some elements, but also I'm very grateful for her to keep me like, here's my goal for the week. Here's what we can do. Here's what we can knock out so that we don't get sidetracked with other things that aren't going to move us forward. And she's really, really great at keeping us grounded and asking that always important question of like, if we do this, how is that going to help us? How is that going to move forward? Like, we are both very conscious of not wasting time in any element, which goes back to like, if we write something, we want to use it in some way. Because we have a lot of kids and we have busy lives and, we don't want to waste our time. But yeah, I don't know. I'm appreciative for that element.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, staying on track is huge, no matter what project you're doing and who you're doing it with. Definitely. Well, any final thoughts to share with our listeners? And where can we find you? Tell them where to go to get your book and find you on social and all that great stuff.
I think the easiest way is if you go to our website, adorethemaparenting.com. You can find our book there. You can find all of our social media handles there. You can sign up for our newsletter and get free printables and all of that good stuff on the website. And the book's also available from all major retailers. So parenting while working from home should get you there.
Fantastic. And you are coming back on to do another episode, and we're going to talk more about your book and parenting and managing your life, parenting, work from home, and creative productivity balance. So many great things to bring back to the round table. So thank you for joining us today, and we will be talking to you soon.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for listening to the StoryWorks Roundtable. Find all our shows, show notes, and videos at storyworkspodcast.com.